Greetings, everyone. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every single one of you, and welcome to another episode of Seeds of Witness. Of course, that witness is the last days anointed witness, Yisrael Abel Hawkins, for those who are unaware. But I wanted to start out in mentioning him by giving a sincere compliment to the latest edition, the latest newsletter that I received in the mail here recently, which was very excellently done. Very excellently done, sincerely. Particularly the information along the side relating to the great teacher, the last days anointed witness, Yisrael Abel Hawkins, whose seed this program is named in honor of. Right? But there's a couple things in here that really caught my attention. The month was given that he actually went to rest, which I don't think any more so than anything else in Yahweh's plan that takes place with regard to his people is a coincidence. The month of Moshe, and of course there are great comparisons and parallels that are drawn in Scripture with regard to the work of Moshe and the work that is taking place today, right, according to prophecy. If you recall, we were looking at the writings of Moshe. Actually, the last episode, that's where we stopped off at in Deuteronomy chapter 18, somewhere around verse 18. We were kind of looking at we were speaking a moment ago about things proceeding according to prophecy. We were looking at the examples of the prophets, at least one of them in particular, the great prophet Jeremiah. And we will be getting more into his life again this episode as well. And so much as the scriptures tells us to examine it as examples, they were exemplary in the way that they handled hardship and difficulty and suffering in general, in so much as you teach by example, but also for those who teach, for teachers, for prophets as well. And we know in this time period, and none of Yahweh's prophecies are untrue or will ever fail, that there are prophets who will prophesy to come forth in this time also. The first two prophets, which were the last days anointed witnesses, as scripture shows in a number of different places, but it says it outright in the book of Revelations, I believe somewhere around chapter 11. And then, of course, the scriptures speak of those prophets, or at least one prophet, the consolidated work under the last days anointed witness, Yisrael Abel Hawkins, the last prophet, actually his spirit being poured into certain of his seed, and then prophets coming forth from him. And the prophet is just, an inspired teacher, an obvious, very strong and inspired teacher. We kind of had a little bit of a laugh at how, there's a lot of people that might want to get on that bandwagon and be a part of the feeling that it makes me think about the guy who said he was Yahshua. So it's been Yahshua, the story the great teacher told us. When he was in Jerusalem. It's like, well, did y'all sacrifice? We're like, no, we got out of town. You got out of town before we can do that part. People, well, yeah, I'm a part of that. I'm a prophet. The prophets are examples of bearing affliction and long suffering, and in a lot of cases, all the way up into death. You see people trying to put themselves forward. In some cases, putting other people forward. Yeah, you're an example of that prophecy being fulfilled. You're a prophet. Children even. He's like, man, okay. if it were to be granted, if it were not the case that the person is pushing it, like the woman who had her two sons and brought them to Yahshua, it was like, well, I want them to be on your right and on your left in the kingdom. He was like, well, you have no idea what you're asking for. This isn't TV or what you might see painted in murals and stuff back then, or what you see put together in books with flashy colors, or whatever ideas that you might have that are fanciful in your notion about glory and all kinds of riches and wealth and power, which is true, but you know what you got to go through in order to qualify to be able to be trusted in executing that office. You don't know what I'm getting ready to be murdered in one of the most heinous ways possible in order that my character would be built with the kinds of things that would allow me to be able to occupy the office that I'm headed to. What do you think is going to take place with the people who want to be on the right and left of me? You sure you want your babies to go through that while you pushing them forward and thinking about money and wealth and glory and all of this kind of stuff? But it's kind of like this. It makes me think about that. When it speaks about that prophecy and how quick people are to try to push other people out there as supposed examples of it being fulfilled. Anybody that really has that office is not going to be any different for them than it has been with those in the past who had that office. They will be examples of bearing affliction and hardship. And we don't like to think about it, but there's even prophecies about people dying in this time period. So all of that though, we were looking at Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 18 though, because the prophets are important and the teaching is what's going to bring this thing to where it needs to be. It's what's gotten it up until this point, and it's what's going to continue to propel it forward in Yahweh's plans. So we were looking at this particular chapter, which speaks about the teachers, because once again, there's a parallel, even given in Scripture, and taught often between the work of the great prophet Moshe and him bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt and everything that took place while he was doing so, after he did so, and then after his death that he prophesied of. And for the fact that it's history and history informs the present, there's a really great opportunity in examining it to get great perspective on things that are taking place, to be quite honest, even now. But, okay, so here he says in 18, I will raise up for them. Just that right there, the great teacher used to always say, that's a million sermons right there. Just that phrase right there. But I will raise up, that a person would not get were it not a teacher that appointed out to him, but that's everything that was brought out with the bringing up. If you remember for those who have been studying for a while with the house of Yahweh and under the teacher, the last days anointed witness, Yeshua Abel Hawkins, the great prophet who is now resting, the great prophet Yeshua Abel Hawkins, who's referred to by a number of different things in Scripture, the branch and so on and so forth, whole other subject, don't want to get off into that. But if a person could go to YisraelSays.com and type in bringing up, you probably will want to get a strong first, just so you can see that the raising up and bringing up are just, it's the exact same word, and it's speaking about the exact same phenomenon. But I just wanted to point that out because in looking at this, a person they might think magically, like it's just, well, I will raise up for them a prophet, like they just bring out of the ground a vapor or something that just arises out of nowhere. But it's not that. It's a work that takes place. It's everything that we were speaking about before. It's one, a person being given an opportunity, a foreordained opportunity, as we'll see in just a moment, in looking at the life of the great prophet Yeremiah, who was one who was raised up. It's a person being given a preordained opportunity and then them making the very wise choice to take advantage of that opportunity. But taking advantage of that opportunity has to do with a bunch of hard work, a bunch of studiousness, and a passion and a love for knowledge in general, but definitely the knowledge of Yahweh. And being able to forge and create a relationship with Yahweh that enables a person to be able to get deep insight into His Word, with the responsibility then of guarding it and teaching it. But all of that is the raising up. So it's just not an overnight thing. I will raise up for them a prophet like you. And for them is another important point. Not to hurt anybody, not to harm anybody, not to kill anyone, but for them, for their benefit. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. Whoever will not listen to my words, which he speaks in my name, I will judge him for it. So what I would like to do is to breathe life into that scripture by taking a look, here a little and there a little, at an actual example of this taking place. Bearing in mind the last episode where we were speaking about the great prophet Yeremiah and how a lot of people might think sequentially with regard to him, like, okay, with the great prophet Yeremiah, that's way after the book of Job, what they call him Job in the King James Version, Job presently in The book of Yahweh, his actual name was Yeshub. That's way past the book of Psalms, and you got Proverbs, you got Ecclesiastes and Isaiah. Oh, Yeremia was way down, and we have difficulty really seeing things in terms of how they actually were with regard to the events that were progressing after the death of the great prophet Moshe. But actually, Yeremia was around in the time of the kings, as we were saying. The whole movement that we see in Samuel, where the people very quickly wanted to get away from the things that Moshe had laid down and were trying to change things, and were basically pushing the people to forget Yahweh and to turn back instead to everything that they had been in Egypt. When they were back in Africa, in Egypt, with the God worship that they were involved in, and all of the many forms that takes, the lifestyles, the so-called lifestyles that they were living in Egypt, trying to bring the people back into that after Moshe had taken them out of that. All of that, of course, is what was quickly represented in the people coming to, led by elders, led by priests, coming to Samuel and changing things over from the righteous judges of Yahweh that we saw in Deuteronomy, for example, very early on, when judges were selected, to kings. And right around that time, when the kings were on the scene, power behind the scenes, behind the throne kind of thing, really guiding things. But nonetheless, that was the same time period where the great prophet Yeremia was raised up. Of course, they wouldn't listen to him. But let's look at that, though. Let's read that for ourselves. Bear in mind and comparing spiritual things with spiritual things. Everything we just read here by the great prophet Moshe, who was telling them, they called him Moses, but his name was Moshe, what was going to take place. This is how this is the faith that you're now involved in. For those that it was newly, there was some who were trying to practice it in a way in Egypt. But this is how things are going to proceed with the plan of Yahweh, the same as it has. Like he raised up a prophet for them already in Moshe, and this same process is going to continue on even after my death. Yahweh will raise up prophets, and it took like 40 years to raise up Moshe. He got certain education in Egypt, and I was supposed to have the clock going at this point. I was anxious to get to it. Let me get one going now, though. I guess I just got to guesstimate on how far I've gone so far. Please be quick. Please be quick and remember your point. So even then he went to Egypt. There's a lot of stuff that he learned in terms of the education that I imagine he had to get completely and totally away from and get rid of philosophy and stuff like that, because people were coming to Africa, people were coming to Egypt from all around the world. Egypt was the crown jewel of Africa, as much as America is for the West, in Europe. And they were teaching a number of different things, philosophical, hypothetical stuff, all kinds of stuff. But the rudiment stuff, the basic stuff, like how to count and how to read and all of those kind of things. I imagine those helped him pretty well, at some point potentially in executing his office, or at least preparing him to learn so that he could execute his office. But eventually, of course, he was driven out of Egypt, and he was raised up. He was brought up for 40 years before he was eventually sent back to get the children of Israel. And of course, there was one who was prophesied to raise up. I will raise up. There was one who was prophesied to raise people up, to raise prophets up, and people, not just prophets, people for a number of different offices, even in this time period. But so, all of that. But an example of this, I will raise up one prophet. If we turn to Yeremia chapter 1. Yeremia chapter 1. And it says, the sayings of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, of the priestly family that lived in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin. So a big telltale sign, red flag for those whose minds have been shaped and formed with the things that have been taught priorly concerning the tribe of Benjamin. All you got to do is go to Genesis chapter 49 to start, not the only place, but a great place to start, and speaking about the kinds of things that were coming forth from the Benjaminites. You know, they were wolves. They were the grievous wolves who were seeking to, and ultimately they did, to subvert, to undermine, and to destroy, to sabotage the work that Moshe had started. The person that they call Moses, his name was Moshe, had started in bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt. The Benjaminites were a very instrumental part, satanically speaking, and working to get the people to forget Father Yahweh, and the scheme and plot to get the people to forget Father Yahweh and to embrace demons instead, to embrace gods instead, to turn back to sin, the way of Egypt that was being practiced in Egypt. But so if you notice, this is where Jeremiah, the person that they call Jeremiah, has been raised up. These are the people doing all who prophesied to do all of the trash and who were doing it, and in their midst, in a priestly family, so you know what was going on. Once again, I will raise up. Here is Jeremiah. But it says, to whom the word of Yahweh came in the days of Yoshiah, who's spoken of a lot and among the people of Yahweh in these days as an encouragement to the youth to show what young people could do. That whole story for those who are familiar with it, and there's a great lesson to be gotten from that too. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but during the days of Yeshai, son of Ammon, king of Yada, in the 30th year. So all of this is the was. Yahweh's name is it stands for that which was, that which is, and that which will be. You know, we covered that. Now the was is history, and that's what we're taking a look at now. There's a very great value in knowing what was. It gives us perspective on what is, in addition to what will be. But so continuing, he going down to verse 4 says, then the word of Yahweh came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before I formed you in the womb. Deep stuff, you know, not to go into now, but before you were born. So once again, it's not a random thing at all. It's all according to a plan. Before you were born, I sanctified you, and I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. You think about that when it speaks about prophets being raised up in these days. Once again, it's not some magical thing. It's not some random thing. It's nothing mystical about it. It's all according to a plan that is taking place, and there's a raising up, and there's much that goes into it. But it says, okay, well, skipping down for the sake of time. Let's get to verse 15 where it says, for behold, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, says Yahweh. They will come, and each one will set their throne at the entrance of the gate of Jerusalem. Speaking about the difficulties they were having because they were changing what Moshe had laid down, and they were going back to Egypt. They wanted to be just like all of the other nations. And all of the other nations were striving to be like Egypt. We had covered that before. Well, I don't know, in writings, in some of the writings that Father Yahweh inspired to bring forth, the archive of which I hope is still available for certain people to peruse. But we spoke about it then. You know, it goes into a bunch, but you know, everything started in Egypt. When you think about Egypt and the pyramids, right? And then all of these articles where there's pyramids all over the world. It shows you the influence of Egypt. It was the first world power. And so when we're speaking about, and every other nation has sought to emulate, you know, has taken pieces from it. It wanted to have it as a crown jewel. But when we're speaking about trying to be like all of the other nations, it's trying to be like that nation. In many ways, it's trying to be like Egypt. And so they were getting away from what Moshe had taught them. Yahweh ultimately inspiring, putting his words in Moshe and had taught them, which would have gotten them away from that Egyptian way and gotten them into the way of Yahweh, which would have kept them safe in all the various forms, that health safe, their mind safe, you know, their sanity safe. and they were having problems. It kept them safe from unprovoked conflicts, unmerited conflicts. But the more they got away from Yahweh and readopted the way that people were pushing them towards the way of the nations, the more they found themselves in confrontations with nations. And so this is what we're seeing here, right? And in the midst of all of this, Jeremiah is now, after having been raised up, after having been reared up and brought up, he's brought forth to begin teaching. But it says, at the entrance of the gates of Jerusalem, against all its walls surrounding it, and against all its cities, I will utter my judgments against them. I will utter my judgments against them concerning all the wickedness of those who have forsaken me. Once again, this is Moshe's group, and they were forsaken Father Yahweh. They were forgetting him. It was a plot in many cases that was in motion. That, we got people who have varying levels of strength. Some people were just being manipulated. Some people were folding under the psychology. It was a bunch going on. But if you remember this same prophet and speaking about it in chapter 23, he says outright there was scheming going on. And everything that comes to mind and is represented in that definitively, that's how they brought it about. For some people, it was just that way, never sincerely believed anyway. I'm certain came out of Egypt with the entire objective of sabotaging everything that Moshe was trying to accomplish. But for other people, it just, they got caught up. But the net result was the same. The nation just ended up forgetting Yahweh and in large part is suffering as a result of it. And he was not pronouncing his judgments for what was going to take place, not in any retaliatory way, in any vindictive way, vengeful way, which the mistranslations attempt to portray, but just telling them what's going to take place. You jump off the building, it's as simple as saying you're going to smack the ground. Without your subconscious mind and the ability to be able to defy gravity, you jump off of a building, you're going to go splat. And the higher up, the more impactful the thud. And the less likely you're going to survive it. That's just, how it is. You guys are breaking this particular law. This is what is going to take place with you. And because, of course, of even greater ability, a person can go from more than just, Yahweh can go from more than just, you're going to be in conflicts with people to, these are the kinds of conflicts that are going to unfold. And that's all of the judgments are. But I will utter my judgments against them concerning all of the wickedness of those who have forsaken me and have burned incense to the hinder gods, going back to Egypt, and worship the works of their hands. But as for you, get yourself ready. Right? So once again, it's not a spontaneous thing. I will raise up a prophet. Oh, it's something magical. It's like the carrots or something like that, or broccoli coming up. Well, it's definitely a plant, but even with that plant, there's a lot of nurturing that has to take place in order for that to manifest. There's nothing magical about it. And if the work isn't done, then that just doesn't come. But he says to the great prophet Jeremiah here, get yourself ready, stand up and speak to them all that I command you. Do not break down because of them, or I will break you down in front of them. For behold, this day I have made you a fortified city, an iron pillar, and walls of bronze against the whole land, against the kings of Yada, against his princes. So these are the people who he was having to correct, and point things out to. It was princes and against priests, and this is the point that we were getting to last episode, where there was this. If you look at scriptures almost from the beginning, starting with the first righteous priest, but he was also a prophet. He's one who was actually a priest and a prophet. Starting with the great prophet Abel, who wrote many prophecies, all the way down to others. This contentious relationship, that exists between the prophets and the priests. In many cases, we're looking at Moshe's group, which came later on down the line, but it had to do with this whole idea of people attempting to change things. And even then, it was still the case. Cain was a priest. He was a priest in the house of Yahweh. Cain was. Not a popular fact, but it's and for some it might be unpalatable, but it's nonetheless factual. So this is I'm going to be sending you against priest. And now he wasn't himself. There's nothing that indicates that he was, but I'm going to be sending you to talk to priests, to point things out to, and to teach with regard to things that are being done that are not appropriate, coming forth from princes and kings and priests and the people of the land. So this is what led to them being killed in a lot of cases because of what we see in verse 19. They are going to fight against you. They're not going to like it. They're not going to like it at all. They're going to fight against you. Tooth and nail, they're going to fight like hell against you. And in many cases, so much that you'll wind up losing your life. But the person that loses his life for the sake of Yahweh, of course, saves it, as Messiah said. But if you look over there at the side note, where it has with priests, side note C is preachers. So and a lot of times it's preaching. Sometimes we just be outright and physical, like we saw in the last episode, where you had people who were in the office of priest. The one guy who was over the house of Yahweh. Who literally beat on the man, literally punching on the man. So it could be physical too, but in actions and words, they're going to fight against you. But you better not break down. Get yourself ready for it. And of course, that's the whole set your mind in advance kind of thing. This is kind of what I'm talking about for those who are anxious to be a part of fulfilling certain prophecies. Well, no, it's not him. He's not the one that's a part of fulfilling that prophecy. These ones are. Especially if we're talking about some glory, my babies, all this kind of, all right. If it's given to a person sincerely, it's like, okay, well, you want them to be? All right, let's give them an opportunity. Do you know what you actually putting on them? But set your mind, because they're going to fight against you. They're going to kill you in some cases, and I'm going to let them. But don't break down because of it. So. And of course, there's the hope of a resurrection. But I just wanted to look at that. And that's what he was dealing with. There's a lot of other scriptures that we can point at. Once again, let's just turn to one more because we are running out of time. But to show what Yahweh was trying to do, let's just get to Jeremiah chapter 25. The same prophet Jeremiah that we're looking at. The scriptures tells us that they're examples. For dealing with hardship and difficulties and suffering in general, but definitely for the kind of experience, the kinds of tests and trials that those who have the office of teacher can expect to come up against. But at 25, I just wanted to point out here what Yahweh was trying to do in each case, because if you remember what Moshe said, these teachers are being trained, they're being brought up, preordained before the world even began, and given this opportunity, and where they capitalize on it, man, isn't it wonderful? Especially when they go all the way through with it, they become strong and don't buckle. But I'm doing this for you. If you think about other scriptures where Father Yahweh desires our success, and it says here, and speaking about this, Yahweh, remember Deuteronomy chapter 18 where it says he's going to raise up. And Jeremiah chapter 25 and verse 1, let's start there. It says, and Yahweh has sent to you all of his servants, the prophets, right? Rising early and sending them, but you have not listened. Remember they were told to listen? Nor inclined your ear to hear. Skipping down to verse 6. It says, and we have to read 5. It says, they said, turn again now, everyone from his evil way. They had turned back to the evil way of Egypt, that other tree. Remember, there's only the 2 trees. And from the evil of your doings, and dwell in the land that Yahweh has given you and to your fathers forever and ever, and do not follow after hinder gods. Let go of Egypt. Let go of Egypt. If nothing else, definitely the sinful ways that were characteristic of and being promoted all throughout the world by Egypt, and it's God worship, it's demon worship, that was what was behind them. That's started with Cain on down. That's what got them off. It was the wrong kind of inspiration. Though it's a seldom acknowledged factor in it all, it's real. It's very real. But it says, and do not follow after hinder gods to serve them, and do not worship them. Do not provoke me to anger, provoke themselves to anger with the works of your own hands, then I will not harm you. But of course, you can see down in verse 7, you can read that for yourself for the sake of time. It was not Yahweh harming them. They were harming themselves. Forgetting Father Yahweh, as we saw in the book of Yeketcha, was leading to them being absent of the knowledge of Yahweh, not retaining them in the forefront of their minds so that they would be cautioned against behavior that would damage their persons, damage their bodies, not just their relationships with other people, hurting and harming their relationships among one another and among the nations, so that there was warfare, individual against individual and country against country, but even wars within themselves, brought about by not having the due safeguards in their minds and being cautioned and having a value for refraining from certain conduct and behavior based on what Yahweh warns us concerning with regard to it. All of that was gone as Yahweh began to leave and go from their thinking, And so they were hurting themselves. And he was just trying to, out of care and concern, out of true love, out of a ha, trying to reverse that, trying to prevent them from hurting themselves. And he told them on a number of occasions, if you would listen, I will heal you. But now what he got in return for it, we can get to that. Oh man, it's just a bunch of this I'm not going to get to on this one. But we'll keep going for as long as we can. But now, this is Jeremiah 29. So he's raised up Jeremiah in the midst of the Benjaminites, the grievous wolves of that time period that were sabotaging, just destroying the work of Moshe, bit by bit, generation by generation, sometimes not bit by bit, in huge swaths, just murdering and killing people, and definitely the prophets. But here is Jeremiah, who's been raised up in the midst of them. And we get on to chapter 29 and verse 24, where it says, "You will also speak to Shemaiah the Nehelamite. It's not actually a tribe or anything like that. A person can look into it if it just has to do with dreamers. The false prophets. Well, you're a prophet. The whole rock preach the message out of rivalry and strife. No, he's a prophet. Here goes a prophet. Listen to him, kind of thing. And so you had these individuals who were opposing Jeremiah. And he was speaking about them in chapter 23 when he said it's prophesying all of these things that they've dreamed up in their minds that are enticing to people. And that's all that name is talking about, Nehelamite. His name was Shemaiah, and he was one of those dreamers that Moshe was talking about, just stuff that that he concocted in his own thinking, just to fight against, to preach against, and to oppose Yahweh's prophet, who he had raised up, taught and trained, nothing magical, raised up, which means he knew scripture. He was strong in doctrine and in the knowledge of Yahweh. And kind of like, deacons like Stephen, they couldn't stand up against it, that kind of bringing up. And, they would oppose him with, ridiculous stuff. Or in another case, like Jeremiah said, they were stealing his words. They would take his own words and, make it out like it was theirs. The life of the great prophet Jeremiah, I mentioned that in some of the inspired writings that I had an opportunity to contribute. Also, the life of the great prophet Jeremiah, it really boils down to where you are, or where things are in the plan of Yahweh in general, then where you are in your work with Yahweh, the kinds of challenges, the kinds of tests and trials, your growth in the faith, where you are at that particular time, and it causes certain examples, certain portions of the collective account to have greater value and significance for you. Sometimes it's David, sometimes it's the great prophet Yeshua, sometimes it might be several of them. But where we are now, oh man, there's so much significance for the life of the great prophet Jeremiah, who was raised up and sent to teach. During this time period when once again the group of Moshe was a bunch going on, But so it says this, you will speak to Shemaiah the Nehelamite, saying, the dreamer, saying, this is what Yahweh of hosts, the Father of Israel, has spoken. You have sent letters in your name to all of the people who were at Jerusalem. This guy who was a false prophet, a phony, a false teacher, a phony. You have sent letters in your name to all the people who were at Jerusalem, and to Zephaniah, son of Maaseh, the priest, and to all of the priests, which said, Yahweh has appointed you priest instead of Yahweh the priest. Now okay, so let me see. Hopefully we have enough time to get that one in. Yahweh the priest. But 2 Kings 11, 2 Kings 11:1. 2 Kings 11:1. I believe, is that it? 2 Kings? Did I miss it? Okay. So, this is a great one. It kind of gives you the time period, but that's not it. Let's look at Second Chronicles. Yahweh is mentioned there. The Yahweh that is talking about in the book of Jeremiah, who they were given his office. He was a very righteous priest. But they were given his office, because it's like Messiah said in the book of Hebrews, men don't continue in the office of priesthood at this time. In many cases, there's an opportunity for some to not taste death in this time period, but up until now, men come, they receive their opportunities, and they go to rest, So Yahweh is out of the picture, and in his place of this very righteous priest, you had other people who were put in the office of priesthood. Right, but now as for Yahweh, 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 24, 15 through 19. Let's see, 24. Does this give it to us? Okay, yes, he is speaking about him. It says, but Yahweh grew old and full of years, and he died, at the age of 130. So, he went the way of all men, but in his place, other priests were put in his place. And this guy, this Shemaiah, supposed teacher, a false teacher, he's sending letters to everybody, apparently influential, so don't know what else went along with him. But he says, Yahweh has appointed you priests instead of Yahweh, or in the stead of Yahweh the priest, that you be in charge of the house of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh is y'all's, right? But which tells us that before that it was Yahweh who was governing things. But that you be in charge in the house of Yahweh. Therefore, you should seize any madman who considers himself to be a prophet, and you should put him in prison and in the stocks. Now then, why have you not reprimanded Jeremiah of Anathoth, who makes himself a prophet to you? The truth is, we'll get to this one, and we'll probably close on this, but in Deuteronomy chapter 18, Yahweh tells us what is the true measure of whether or not a person is actually one of his prophets. If what a prophet proclaims in the name of Yahweh does not come to pass or does not come true, this is a message Yahweh has not spoken. So in the opposite also, when it does come true, that's obvious indication that it is a message that Yahweh spoken, and that particular individual, that teacher, is of Yahweh. Right? And the fact that the great prophets, his writings are being fulfilled, are evidence of the fact that he was sent by Yahweh. If you turn to, despite what they were saying, that though they had rejected him and all of that kind of stuff, he wasn't part of that little clique and they let people charge him up to go at him, he was still one of the prophets of Yahweh, as evidenced by the fact that his prophecies are still coming true even today. But if you turn over to Jeremiah chapter 49 and verse 36. This is one having to do with our own time period, and it is a great marker for where we are in terms of the fulfillment of certain benchmarks in Yahweh's plan, and how quickly we can expect other things. But here in Jeremiah chapter 49 and verse 37, this is the great prophet that was raised up, that was trained up, brought up. Jeremiah, but he says, for I will cause Elam, which is Iran. You look that up and it will tell you there's no philosophy there. Elam is Iran. Let's start at 36. I will bring the four winds against Elam, which is Iran. I will bring the four winds against Iran from the four corners of heaven. I will scatter them to all these winds, so that there will not be a nation to which the outcasts of Elam will not go. Of course, in order the spirit of the prophets are in subjection to the prophets, as we've said before. And so in order to get the whole four winds thing, and that this is actually speaking about the end times, the person would have to turn to the book of Revelations, where it's speaking about those four winds. Revelations chapter 7, I believe it is. You know, Revelations chapter 7 is speaking about the end days. Everybody knows the book of Revelations is talking about the end time. But it says, after these things, I saw four Malachim standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, so that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Right? So that's the winds that it's speaking about here. This is prophecy given by the great prophet Jeremiah about the end time, about the last days. And he's speaking about Iran being a principal player in this. It says, for I will, once again, I will bring these four winds against Elam from the four corners of heaven. I will scatter them to all of these winds, so that there will not be a nation to which the outcast of Edom will not go. So it's continuing on in 37, it just says, for I will cause Edom to be terrified before their enemies. Before those who seek their lives, I will bring destruction upon them. So destruction, Iran is going to be destroyed, is what the great prophet Jeremiah said. And of course, that's exactly what we see taking place in the world today. A bunch to get into, and I don't know that we'll have an opportunity to. I would like to just make it lengthy, you know, and go ahead and go into it. But there's at least one article that I like to read for perspective's sake. But it says here, this is an article, you would have difficulty getting it, you know, because this news source is behind a paywall these days if you don't have a paid subscription to them. But it says U.S. CENTCOM, which is the branch of the military responsible for Middle Eastern affairs, Middle Eastern military affairs. U.S. CENTCOM pulls closer to Israeli military as Mossad tests Iran. Right, so it says training exercises represents the tightest collaboration ever, but a deputy commander of CENTCOM tells Al Monitor the U.S. had no involvement in recent strikes attributed to Israel in Isfahan, Iran, and Eastern Syria. Now, here's the part I want to get to, though. It says last week, for the first time ever. Now, this is also history. This is just a couple years, though, but it's within that time frame that we're in now. You know, the time period after tribulation. But it says that's the time period we are in now. That's another story. We won't get into that one. But it says but it's all leading to that. You know, it's leading to the nuclear war that's spoken. Okay, see, I'm getting ahead of myself. But that's spoken of to take place after the tribulation. But it says last week, for the first time ever, U.S. Air Force F-35s launched from the USS George H.W. Bush. It flew several hundred miles over the Mediterranean and linked up with Israeli F-35s. To simulate a combined attack on surface-to-air missile batteries in the Negev. As they neared the target, accompanying F-16s and F-15s peeled away to attack as many as 10 fourth-plus generation aircraft posing as the defenders of an imagined enemy airspace. This is the one I was trying to get to. Speaking about the destruction of Elam or Iran, another fulfillment of a prophecy that proves that, despite the fact that they were saying that, you know, Jeremiah, the great prophet they called Jeremiah, Jeremiah was self-appointed, and he was saying he was a prophet, but he really wasn't. The fact that the things that he prophesied are being fulfilled even now bear evidence of the fact that he was in fact a prophet sent by Father Yahweh. And this is just another one. But it says the first wave successfully cleared the skies, enabling the strikers, 3 nuclear-capable U.S. B-52 bombers that had taken off from the United States some 16 hours prior, tailed by U.S. and Israeli fighters, to drop more than 100,000 pounds of live munitions on mock strategic targets. So a person can look through all of this and see that it was really designed to send a message to Iran. But it just goes to show, that the destruction that's spoken of, which if a person looks even more deeply into it, nuclear wars are coming. That destruction is going to be nuclear, and it's going to take place twice. There's one that's anticipated to take place according to prophecy right now in the Middle East, but then afterwards is going to branch out from there. Now, that's a bunch. And we can't walk through the scriptures on that at this time, but that's just me saying it. I'll say it now and then I'll show you later. Or it'll be reiteration for people who are already aware of it. But now I just wanted that has to be in a person's mind in order to understand other things, right? So remember, the B-52s were involved in this exercise, nuclear capable, where the United States, led by Israel, basically launches a nuclear strike on someone, on somebody. Of course, that someone is Iran. So if a person has that in mind, there's other things that then make more sense. Like this one right here, where it says B-52s fly with Israeli fighters over the Mediterranean, right? This one came out last month. When you see that, when they're flying the B-52s, just like that exercise was designed to tighten their coordination in doing. This is the message that they're sending when the B-52 bombers with Israeli fighters are flying over the Mediterranean. It's a nuclear threat. So for the person that says it's outrageous, like nothing like that isn't going to take place, and despite the fact that it's in your face, despite the fact that they're threatening to do it, people, but they're never going to do it. So it's not an outrageous idea at all. But that's what you see taking place with articles like that. B-52 flies over with Israeli fighters over the Mediterranean. It's designed to send a nuclear threat that they're eventually going to make great on, just like the great prophet Yahweh said, which will bear evidence of the fact that he was not self-appointed. He was appointed before the world even began, before he was even in the womb, by Father Yahweh. The man did his due diligence. He studied. He was strong in the word of Yahweh. And he was capable of being used by him to teach concerning that which was, that which was going on, and that which will be, even on up until the time of the end, which is what we're in now. But the last one, though, that kind of sheds light on it once more is Trump says Israel would be the leader of a strike on Iran. So it's that whole, once again, that's all that needs to be said if a person has the correct mindset, going on. It's speaking about nuclear destruction. It's speaking about a nuclear strike in the Middle East. So that's quite a bit to have covered today. But we will look to pick up next episode, digging more into the lives of the prophets and looking at the things that have been to lend perspective and to shed light on the things that are, and to also ready and to prepare our understanding to understand those things which are yet to be, those things which are coming. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and join us next episode for another episode of Seeds of the Witness.